Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting the zombies from Run, Fight or Die Reloaded by Grey Fox Games. Hey everyone, Matt here from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to episode 2 of this Run, Fight or Die Reloaded series. Today we're painting the cannon fodder, the main zombies that you'll be facing in this Yahtzee King of Tokyo style zombie survival game. Now in this game there are 70 of this type of mini, there's 35 guys, 35 girls, and in this video I'm going to be doing 20, so 10 guys, 10 girls, and for each of them I'm going to be splitting them into 2 groups of 5. And what I'll be doing is comparing 2 different approaches to speed painting them. And what I want to see is which approach gets the best bang for buck, I suppose. And for this, the buck is time. So comparing the end quality of each of them relative to the amount of time that they take. And then I'll be using whichever approach, gives the best quality compared to the amount of time that it takes, and using that approach to paint the rest of the minis. So the first approach that I'll be doing is the same way that I painted all of the zombies in Zombie 15, which was about the second game I think that I ever painted, and that is purely using washes. And then the second approach is just using thin down acrylics, so just my normal Reaper paints. But both of those use a Zenithal Prime as a base, and then the idea is that both the washes and the thin down acrylics will be thin enough that they'll both let the tones of the Zenithal Prime come through, and that will sort of be the free highlighting and shading that I'll get, so I'll be able to totally skip that highlighting and shading step. Alright, so why am I comparing these 2 approaches? Well, I guess both of them are going to have their own pros and cons, and I want to see which one's going to come out on top relative to the amount of time that it takes. So with the washes, that's the approach that I expect to take less time, and also I figured the tones from the Zenithal Prime are probably going to come through better with the washes as opposed to the acrylics. And so that, free shading and highlighting that I'll get should be more prevalent. But with the thinned acrylics, I expect the end finish there to be better because I'll be able to be more precise and cleaner with the paints as opposed to the washes. But I do still expect to get some of that Zenithal Prime to come through, so I should still get some highlighting and shading. So what I'm going to be looking for is the additional time that it would take to paint with the acrylics worth the extra quality that I get from the finished product. So thinking about that, the time and the relative quality, is it worth spending that extra time? So that's what I'm going to be looking for at the end. So the first step was to put a black prime down. Now the reason that I did a black prime first and didn't just start with grey was because I've painted minis in the past that have started coloured, and putting grey over them, that takes 2 coats to actually cover up that colour, and so I figured black covers that really, really well. Grey goes nicely over black, so if I'm going to be doing 2 coats anyway, I might as well do black first. So yeah, first was black, just purely to cover up the colour that the plastic started as, and gives a good base for the grey to go on. And then I started the Zenithal Prime, which was with a dark grey to go over the whole mini. Now the reason I went with dark grey instead of having black as the first stage of that Zenithal Prime was because if you've ever put wash over black, you'll know it doesn't do much. So you need at least some bit of lightness there for the colour from the wash to actually take effect. So yeah, did the dark grey as the first stage of the prime so that the wash will actually have an effect over that part of the mini. Then hit it with grey from a fairly high angle, a bit lower than what I normally do with the grey because I wanted it to cover most of the mini, but I wanted that bottom part of the mini around the feet and the legs to be darker than the top. And then I finished with a halo of white just around the head and the top of the shoulders. So I just used the edge of the cone from the airbrush just to pick out the head and just the tops of the shoulders. And what that does is it gives a good contrast between the top of the mini and the bottom of the mini, so that when those tones come through from the prime, the top of the mini is clearly brighter than the bottom of the mini. So when they're in the middle of the table, it looks like the top is brighter than the bottom, as would be from the light. But it also creates a focal point for people's attention to be drawn to when they first look at it. So they'll be looking at the top of the mini rather than the bottom. And once that prime's done, it's now just a case of either applying the washes or the thin down acrylics. And so started with the skin in both cases, and you can see here I've gone with a mix of yellow, green, and the flesh tone with the washes. I did the same thing with the acrylics, just obviously a different yellow skin and green tones. And I tried to keep it more on the greenish, yellowish side rather than going with it like a darker sort of brown, because I wanted, a lighter colour is going to let those tones from the prime come through more. And I just wanted it to be not necessarily a cartoony look, but I didn't want to stick too much to like a necessarily realistic, gory, rotted kind of look that you may find in other zombie games. This is more of a light-hearted, fun sort of game, and so I wanted to reflect that a little bit more in the colours as well. So I worked in quite a bit of yellow into the skin tone, just to kind of keep it a bit bright, but still clearly a zombie sort of rotty kind of look. So once the skin was done, it was then simply a case of finishing off the clothes, hair, bandages, those sorts of things, but also doing the eyes and the mouth. So in the artwork, the eyes are yellow, but because of the yellow tones within the skin, I didn't want to do yellow eyes because they blended too much into the skin. So I just went with white, and I didn't paint a pupil or anything like that, because what that did is it created this kind of real vague sort of look to the eyes, which I really, really like, considering that they're zombies. And then with the tongue, I used just a mid-range sort of red, so that there was a bit of brightness to it, so it stood out, and kind of tied in with that sort of cartoony look that I was going for, but not sort of too dark and gross that, it sort of fell into that realistic look that I was sort of trying to avoid. Now, I mentioned it just seeing as I'm doing it here at the moment. At first, I did a bone colour for the bandages and then a wash over the top just to kind of dirty them a little bit. The problem here was that then the bandages got lost within the skin tone. So later on, I just use either white or a bone colour for the bandages. I can't remember which one, but I don't pop a wash over the top because I still wanted them to stand out. And then the blood effect that kind of goes over them, it looks like there's a lot of blood sort of seeping through the bandages. So yeah, I move away from doing a wash over the bandages just purely because they get lost within the skin tone. And then normally I try and do the bases last as kind of that finishing touch, but once the eyes and the tongue were done, I then did the base, and I did that with a mix of grey and brown just to kind of create like a paved, concrete-y sort of look that's a little bit dirty. And then I did a blood effect. So I just used blood for the blood god, and from one mini to another, I tried to do a different sort of pattern of blood. So for some I did lots of blood around the face and then down the chest and on the hand, so it's like that zombie has recently eaten someone. Others were more around their legs and things like that. Just kind of tried to mix it up a little bit, but yeah, just used blood for the blood god and just put that on. Early on, I was really kind of just globbing it on. Still trying to do like a bit of a pattern, but putting it on quite thick. By the end, or at least by the time I get onto the girls, I was doing more of a flicky kind of thing, so that it wasn't so globby, more like sort of more smeared, I suppose. And I think just kind of not having it so thick looked a little more realistic, I suppose, because, yeah, thinking about the size of these minis and how much blood would actually be on them, in like getting the right scale for the blood, there wouldn't be quite so much, or it wouldn't be so obvious. And so I mixed it up a little bit towards the end between globbing it on and smearing it a little bit. And yeah, having that little bit of a difference between the way that I applied it gave another good little bit of differentiation from one to another. So that's the basic approach that I go through for each of the 4 groups that I have the minis in. So the washes for the guys, the paints for the guys, the washes for the girls, and the paint for the girls. So it's just skin, clothes, hair, bandages, eyes, mouths, bases, and then the blood effect. So the only other thing that I think is worth mentioning at the moment, because there isn't too much else to talk about before I get to the comparison towards the end, is just the way that I use these 5 colours for the clothing to help speed up the process as much as possible. So each bit of clothing, so the pants for the guys, the skirts for the girls, and then the tops, get one of each of these 5 colours. So within the groups, I don't double up on the pants or the top, and I don't have the same colour on the top as on the bottom. So I'd grab, say, red, and I would do the pants or the skirts on one, and then grab another mini, and then paint the top that same red. Then I'd grab, say, blue, grab a mini, paint the bottom blue, and then grab a different mini and paint the top blue. And so what that does is it helps me make sure that there aren't, 2 with a blue top and blue bottoms, but it also speeds it up because I use one color in its entirety and then swap over to a different one. So that's, doesn't make too much of a difference when you're only painting 5, but when I then end up painting the rest of the minis, so there's 25 guys and 25 girls left to go, being 5 colors, what I'll do is I'll split them into groups of 5, and I will grab, say, red and paint those 5 in that group red pants, and then I'll grab another color and then do another group of 5 with blue pants, then 5 with green pants, and so on. And then I'll go through and take one of each, so 1 pair of red pants, 1 pair of blue pants, 1 pair of green pants, brown and black, and then paint the tops of each of them one colour. And so I'll just be working in blocks of 5 to just stick with one colour and paint its colour in its entirety. So I'm not going to be chopping and changing colours too much. It gives a bit of colour variety and make sure that I don't have the same colour on the top and on the bottom. So from here on, there's not too much to add. I'm just following the exact same process through these 4 groups of minis, but just using a different medium. So you've already seen me do the wash for the guys, now doing the paint for the guys. As you can see, I am putting a wash over the top of the acrylics that I laid down just to add an extra bit of depth. Then I do just the washes with the girls, and then just the paint with the girls. So at the end, I'll do a comparison. I'll have a talk about what I noticed and then what I'm going to do moving forward. But between now and then, there isn't sort of too much to add. So I'm just going to leave you to watch the rest of it. Hope you enjoy watching, and yeah, I'll come back in and do that comparison at the end. One thing I suppose that I haven't actually mentioned yet is that even with the 2 groups where I just use the washes, I still use acrylics for the eyes and for the tongue, just because you can't be that precise with the wash. So the eyes and the tongue are done with acrylics, so that it doesn't run off and bleed anywhere else. But yeah, other than that, everything that you see is washes in the ones that are groups of washes. So yeah, so I'll leave you to watch, and I'll come back in for the comparison at the end. Alright, so I'm going to start the comparison a little bit before you actually see the minis being put next to each other, just so I can get it done before the video actually comes to an end. So what did I end up seeing? Well, back at the start, I expected the washes to take less time, and for the highlighting and shading from the prime to come through a little bit more, but the acrylics to have a better finish because I'd be able to be cleaner and more precise and not have that bleeding from one color to another. So which one did I end up preferring? I thought it would be a tougher choice because I thought I'd be weighing up, is the end quality of the acrylics worth spending that extra time for? For me, the washes were definitely the better one. The highlighting and shading that came through just gave a much better finish than with the acrylics, and because the acrylics didn't let so much of the prime come through, when I put that wash over the top to add a bit of depth into the skin and that, it did just kind of flatten it out a bit, and it just sort of looked a little kind of dirtier, I suppose. And so, yeah, for me personally, this is obviously a subjective choice, but for me, the finish on the washes is just much, much better. It's brighter, more of those tones from the prime come through. It was quite a bit quicker. It would have been a good probably 2 minutes per mini faster. I clocked the washes at about 10 minutes per mini, and with the acrylics, it was about 12 or so minutes per mini. So it was definitely not worth the extra time with the acrylics. So moving forward, 100% I'll be painting with the washes. Much faster, and for me, gives a better finishing look. So there we go. Not necessarily the result I expected. I thought I would probably lean towards the washes in the end, but I thought it would be a closer finish and it would be a tougher choice. But it's a good experiment to do, just to sort of see kind of which approach is better, and then going forward for other games, I'd be able to sort of use this approach if there's lots of minis that do look quite similar. So thank you very much for spending some time watching me paint a few more minis. I really hope you've enjoyed this different sort of video comparing two different approaches as opposed to just doing one mini in one approach. Please let me know if you sort of like this format, because I would sort of be interested in doing maybe some other things like this down the track. Anyway, please leave a comment down below, something that you liked and something that you think can be improved, and please do like and subscribe if you haven't yet, to keep up to date with these videos as they keep coming out. As I've mentioned in the last couple, we have kickstarted a few games that will be arriving in the near future, so there will be quite a few different games popping up over the next few months. And please do stop by the Facebook, Twitter and Instagram accounts that I've set up for this channel, especially Instagram. That's where I am my most active, putting up pictures there of what I'm painting, so you know what's going to be coming up in the near future. So with all that being said, this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.